Direct action, civil disobedience, of course, this is how many of the rights and freedoms have been won in this country and in countries across the world. And they've been used to confront some of the great crimes and injustices. And of course, one of the great crimes at the moment of our age is Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people, which is armed and facilitated by our government and by other Western governments as well. Now, Palestine Action is a movement which has been standing in that great tradition of our ancestors, using direct action, civil disobedience to take on those who are facilitating, those who are complicit in Israel's genocide. Now, before I introduce the brilliant Huda Ammori, who is going to speak to us on behalf of Palestine Action, just a little summary of some of their recent actions. They had a little visit to Donald Trump's golf course and just kind of spruced it up a bit. Let's have a look.
Yeah. Stand for something to fall for anything. I'm sick.
Now, an issue which happens to be close to my heart in terms of the work that I've been doing, which is about the BBC and their systematic failures, to put it mildly, on their reporting about Israel's genocide. Let's just see what Palestine Action got up to when they visited the BBC.
The system needs to change right now. Too much youth are good on me not here right now. Innocent the biggest are here right now. After get the people I must here right now.
And then there is Alliance and Aviva. Now, there is Twickenham Stadium. There was a little match going on at the time, and Palestine Action thought they'd pop along. I'll explain why why Alliance and Aviva have been targets, but let's have a look. And also, Palestine Action paid another visit to Alliance and Aviva today.
We'll be free from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free.
Well, you seem to be busy, if I'm honest. Hello, how are you doing? Great to speak to you. How are you?
Good. It's good to be here.
Let's start with the golf course. Why? I mean, it might seem a bit obvious, but why so important to pay a visit? So this is the golf course in Scotland. We should note, large swathes of Scotland are devoted to golf courses for very rich people, including, of course, the President of the United States. So what was the plan there?
It was basically motivated because of Trump's recent statements and plans he's made to take over Gaza, ethnically cleanse Gaza, him playing these idiotic videos on his social media showing how he wants to build, this beach resort on top of the graveyard of Palestinians and the rubble of Palestinians. And for us, it was important to do something which was going to impact him financially and personally. I mean, he literally issued a death sentence to Palestinians just the other day, and is constantly making the rhetoric that he's coming out with is extremely dangerous to Palestinians. Now, while I do think you can't take him too seriously, he is dangerous and has just sent over 30,000 bombs to Israel, which will no doubt be used at some point to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people. Now, people like Trump you can't really appeal to their morality. That's just not going to work. You can't appeal to someone like Trump's moral compass. But it's important to understand that he sees himself as a businessman. He keeps saying it every 5 minutes, how he's a businessman. And he loves his golf courses. These are his prized possessions, especially the resort that they targeted in Scotland. The Turnberry one is one of, I believe, 10. I'm not a golfer myself, so I'm not an expert on golf, but it's one of 10 that can actually be a part of the Open Championships. And they've already resisted having the Open Championship at that resort because of his views and the controversy around him. But I think this is definitely going to put the nail in the coffin for that resort being used in that way. And I think it's also important to note that's one of the most expensive. It is the most expensive golf course in Britain. It costs £1,000 to play around the golf. So them being out of commission, we know they were shut for the first day And because they literally destroyed and uplifted all the grass and they also painted the signs saying Gaza not for sale, and they dug up the holes, it will take them quite a bit of time to repair that site. And also, I'd just say as well that it's important for people to understand that his golf courses are all across the world. These are vast areas of space. And if he wants to go around treating Gaza as if it's his property, that he should maybe understand that his own property is within reach of ordinary people across the world who can do likewise.
I think it's a vast improvement. It's certainly now it's iconic, which is not what I would normally have said about Donald Trump's golf course. I think the BBC, I mean, people I think are more than aware of what the BBC's failures. And in fact, did check out the interview, everyone that I've done with Karishma Patel, who's a former BBC newsreader, who's gone into great detail about the BBC's systematic failures. People might not be too familiar though with why Alliance and Aviva insurers. I should quote Alliance UK. They said, "We respect everyone's right to have and express an opinion. However, we will not give in to threats and criminal behaviour that endanger the safety and security of our people, business and property." And they say they're going to work closely with the police and be taking independent legal action to address these threats. Tell me, in terms of the Palestinian flag and then the action that was taken, what's going on?
Yeah, so recently Twickenham, Alliance started to sponsor the Twickenham Stadium, and they had this rugby match, the Six Nations event, and it was England versus Italy. And I believe in the 67th minute, they flew a drone over with the Palestine flag, which temporarily paused the game, and the commentator made a comment on it. But it was really just to highlight and send a message to Alliance that, we are calling on them to drop Elbit Systems, drop Israel's biggest weapons firm. And Allianz, as with Aviva, sponsors numerous, sports events. They want their image to look good. They are doing this in order to improve their image. And therefore, targeting them at one of those places is crucial to tarnish that image and draw attention to Alliance's complicity in the genocide of the Palestinian people.
So when we talk about Elbit Systems here, which they're insuring, because previous action, I've discussed this on this very channel. We'll talk about the action being taken about those who took part in it. But we talked about this. Elbit UK, they, as Palestine Action said, they have export licenses for sales to Israel. Because there's Elbit Systems UK, I mean, they've said nothing it manufactures go to Israel Defence Forces, but its UK arm provides equipment to the British military. And it's also, as you said in the statement at the time, as party to the Genocide Convention, Britain has a responsibility to prevent the occurrence of genocide. When our government fails to abide by the legal and moral obligations, it's the responsibility of ordinary people to take action. So, I mean, talking here about the insurers and the role they play, because that's the point. There's it's a system, isn't it, which enables this to take place?
Yeah, definitely. So, in order for Elbit to operate in this country and build these weapons, which all of them would have been first battle tested on Palestinians, because that's how Elbit's business model works. They use the Palestinians, even during the genocide. They'll be testing out new technology, which they'll then try and put on the market and sell to governments worldwide. And we do know as well that there have been shipments during the genocide from these factories to Israel, despite Elbit's claims to the contrary. But they could not operate these factories without several other firms and institutions which help them do that and profit from them making these weapons. And insurers are a key part of that, because Elbit needs insurance legally. You're legally required to have insurance in this country in order to operate these factories. So by providing this insurance, they are directly enabling the production of Elbit's weapons in this country. So like we've already targeted investors, suppliers, landlords, property managers, recruiters, and had several successes with several companies pulling out of working with Elbit, we're also targeting the insurance industry when it comes to Elbit, which is Allianz, who insure Elbit Systems UK, and then Aviva insure one of the factories in Staffordshire, UAV Engines, who build the engines for the Israeli killer drones. So for us, most of our actions against these sites are aimed at causing financial disruption, economic damage, because we want to raise the cost, and Palestine Action has raised the cost for many companies of dealing with Elbit systems, because ultimately it's the same principle. These companies want to make money, they want to make profit. And if working with Elbit gets you so much money, but then you also have Palestine Action coming and causing all of this economic and financial damage to you, you raise the cost to the point where if you just take out the morality, because I've given up with these companies and appealing to their moral conscience, and you just look at it based on profit, it makes financial and business sense to just cut ties with Elbit. And that's our strategy. And that's why we target these companies, to isolate Elbit so that they can't keep functioning in this country.
And I should say Open Democracy, for example, last year did an article about this, and they said the UK government has been accused of being totally complicit in the death of tens of thousands of people in Gaza after handing a fresh round of public cash to the British arm of Israeli arms manufacturer Elbit. That the Ministry of Defence contract that was dated last January was the first time they struck a deal with the Elbit UK subsidiary. Elbit itself reportedly supplies up to 85% of Israel's drones and land-based military equipment, describing its Hermes 450 drones used by Israel for strikes on Hamas targets, it says. As the backbone of the Israeli Defense Forces, we know those drones have killed, used by the Israel-based Elbit, huge numbers of innocent people. And I've been speaking to doctors in Gaza about the impact of that. Now, I mean, in terms of, what's the consequences of this? Because those throughout history who take part in direct action are persecuted by the state. Condemned at the time, history takes rather a different perspective. But there are consequences, aren't they? So can you just talk through? Because I interviewed, this is a Filton 18, the mothers of two of those who took part in direct action. Can you just explain what happened with them? What was the circumstances of their arrest, but what have they been dragged through since?
Yeah, I think at first it's important to say that there have been hundreds of actions and hundreds, if not over 1,000 people who've taken direct action. But the state has taken a particular aim at the Filton 18. So I think since the mother spoke to you, there had been 10 more raids and arrests associated with an action against Elbit's research and development site. They call it research and development site, but actually they found just suitcases, they look like suitcases, full of quadcopter drones and other weapons inside that facility. 6 people had gone inside that facility, destroyed some drones inside, and after that, 10 ended up being remanded and held in prison. And then 3 months later, in November, 10 more people were raided and arrested, again under counter-terrorism powers. They were held again for days in solitary confinement, repeatedly interrogated. They pulled them out in the night, pulled them out in the day, all times, just to continuously interrogate these people, and then eventually charge them with the same offences that the original 10 were facing, and they've all been remanded to prison. Now, whilst they've not been charged under the Terrorism Act, they have been charged with criminal damage, violent disorder, and aggravated burglary, which are serious enough charges, and way overboard in terms of overcharging them on that front. They're now trying to allege that this has a terrorism connection, which means that the judge has the power right at the end of if anyone's convicted at sentencing, the judge can decide if this action was done as and has a connection to terrorism. And the terrorism legislation is actually ridiculously broad, and to the point that if it's allowed to happen in this case, it talks about serious damage to property. It's not beyond the realm that this will then extend to other protest cases, and that they're trying to treat this as a test case to see if it sticks. Now, it is completely absurd, and we do have a lot of hope to fight it, but we need as much support as possible to make sure that this just doesn't land and doesn't stick. And I think part of what they're doing is they're trying to use the process as the punishment, because of the seriousness of the charges, the courts are not giving bail. One person actually, Cameron, got bail by a High Court judge at the Old Bailey. They appealed it straight away, kept him in prison, went to another High Court judge, looked at exactly the same evidence and went, no, you're staying in prison. And some of these people could be inside for 2 years, if not given bail, before they even get a trial. And these are people, a lot of them don't even have convictions. So these are unconvicted people waiting 2 years for a trial where, there's a very decent chance a lot of them, if not all, could be found not guilty of these charges, but you've already served your punishment. And there's supposed to be safeguards, right, in this country, 6-month custody limits to prevent this type of thing from happening. But when people throw around the word terrorism and the counter-terrorism police get involved, it just seems like all of that goes out the window and it's a whole different process. And suddenly, all these rights that you're told about are taken away from you. And so I think also what we're seeing is in some of the cases, the prisons treating people differently because of the association. We had people listed as convicted prisoners, which is only happening to our prisoners, right? When they were on remand. And that means you have less rights, less access to canteen, less visits. So, and even the UN intervened. There was 4 UN special rapporteurs who condemned the use of terrorism in this case, and also said and condemned the treatment of the prisoners. So there is a hearing coming up on March 27th at the Old Bailey where people can come.
So this is... Oh, sorry, that's very important. So I can repeat that. The Old Bailey, when is that? Sorry.
So that's a hearing coming up, and it will be the next time they're in court, not the trial, but it is important. And it's at the Old Bailey on March 27th, and there'll be people outside from 9:30 a.m.
So, it's important that what you mentioned there, Professor Ben Saul, who is an independent expert appointed by the United Nations to monitor human rights, he's written a letter to the government expressing concern over the treatment of these protesters who took part in this. The letter queried whether their restricted status is disproportionately inconsistent with the treatment of other individuals charged with the same ordinary offences, adding treating direct action involving some violence as terrorism overstates the nature of the conduct and seriously risks chilling the exercise of freedom of expression. Again, it's just important to say this is a long history of direct action vilified at the time, vindicated by history. Just on Elbit again, because they will go, any claims this facility supplies the Israeli Ministry of Defence are categorically false. Elbit Systems UK, should be noted, are a subsidiary of the Israeli organisation. So the idea of divorcing them, even though that's their statement, they are obviously inextricably linked. And it's notable, actually, it's interesting that Elbit Systems UK lost its largest ever arms contract with the British government last year, worth over £2.1 billion. And I wonder if the scrutiny which Palestine Action have helped raise had something to do with that. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with the Filton site, it did come out by Declassified that there were shipments to Israel from the Filton site actually just a couple of months after the Filton action. So it again contradicts the statement that they make. But with the Watchkeeper drone project, the primary facility that was being done from was the Leicester factory, which had been repeatedly targeted. People had blockaded the site, got onto the roof of the factory, sprayed red paint into the factory and caused extensive damage to that building. And, in a almost similar fashion to the Filton action, drove a HGV into the front of the building. And all of these actions caused massive disruption to Elbit Systems. They would be shut down for weeks at a time, often after these actions took place. And actually, the Elbit CEO, Martin Fawcett, said in a podcast that he basically remarked that if you're 1 day late in this country for a British government contract, then, you're screwed, basically. So these constant delays and also the demoralization of staff, I think definitely contribute to them losing that contract. What's interesting as well, that's their biggest contract in the UK. So they haven't really got that many British government contracts anymore, even though they keep talking about how much they supply the MOD.
And just to quote the declassified article, very important that you raised, and this is the article which was published just in January, in fact. Arms factories hit by pro-Palestine protests over the last 15 months were sending supplies to Israel. An investigation by Declassified has found the revelation has been called a vindication by Palestine action. Several of the companies associated with Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms manufacturer, which produces many of the drones and missiles used to slaughter Palestinians. And this it says the cargo documents show at least 4 companies associated with Elbit Systems have exported to Israel since the Gaza bombing began, and then it lists those firms. I mean, just finally, a lot of people have, they've watched this horror, a genocide in which their own government is directly complicit, and they've been scared or they're not sure what to do about it. Why would you argue direct action and civil disobedience, which is so, as I said, so attacked and vilified? Why is it so? Why is it in part of all the different parts of the movement? Why is it so important? Do you think?
Every time you do direct action, you make an impact. And when we go and shut down a weapons factory, you shut it down for a minute, you've made an impact. Shut it down for a day, you've made a significant impact. And then when you couple that with a movement where other people are going out again and again, and it's a sustained direct action, you can have real results on these weapons factories and make a real change. And for us, personally, I'd done all the marches, and I worked at an organisation working on boycott campaigns before starting Palestine Action. And you get to a point with that when you realise that it's not matching the severity of the situation. And actually, the most powerful I've ever felt was when I was on top of a weapons factory, smashing it up, had a hammer in my hand, and it didn't matter how many police were around me. I was on there, and I could stop this factory from operating. I mean, I think it's liberating, and it might sound strange knowing you might get arrested at the end of it. You may even go to prison, but understanding in that moment, you've taken the power back and that they are powerless to you as a person. And collectively as people, we've permanently shut down a few of these weapons factories. We've forced so many companies to cut ties with Elbit. You actually have a significant amount of power. And I think constantly people feel very frustrated, feel powerless. But I think once you break through that and realize just what you can do with a group of people, is incredible. And I think it's also inspires other people to step up. And that's how we as a movement have grown. It's by some people taking action, inspiring others to take action, inspiring others to take action. And it's unstoppable. And I think when we see, what they're doing in the Filton 18, they're desperate to stop this momentum. And it's failed. It's completely failed. If anything, the Filton 18 serve as an inspiration for everyone else on the outside, seeing what they're going through for the Palestinian people. Inspires us all to step up and see what we can do. And there's so many different types of actions people can take. I just encourage people to really think about what they are able to do, what they're able to sacrifice. If that's facing a magistrate's court trial and spending some time in a police station, if that's risking going to prison in order to stop these weapons factories from operating, it is worth it. Many of us have felt a lot of stress. You go through these court cases, but ultimately you always go with your head held high, knowing that you're on the right side of history, no matter what the state does to us now.
And what I would say with my historian's hat on is, although those who take part in these forms of action, they break the law, they get the state, they get arrested and imprisoned and all the rest of it. The point I would always just make is, the suffragettes, now everybody lauds the suffragettes, but they were really reviled and locked, thrown in dirty cells with tubes forced down their throats to force feed them. People can, when people have these discussions about the law and get very, angry and passionate about it, Britain is in violation of international law by facilitating a genocide. If we're going to talk about breaking the law, we can have a discussion about breaking the law, everyone. The law is being broken systematically by some of the worst war crimes and crimes against humanity of our age. And it's interesting what laws people get angry about and which laws people don't get angry about. And laws which are supposed to protect human life on an industrial scale, apparently breaking those laws is completely and utterly acceptable. Absolutely brilliant to speak to you, and so fascinating to hear about what you've been doing and what obviously those who've been taking part in this direct action are currently going through. Please, everyone, let's make sure Huda's voice is heard loud and clearly, so people hear the side which the media will otherwise not allow people to hear. Press like, subscribe, leave your comments. Good for the algorithm. But Huda, honestly, great to speak to you again.
Thank you for having me.